Today on Exploring Scotland's History, we're going to take you a walk along Loch Etive and discuss the history, the geology and also the mythology associated with the area. This is Eilean Duirinnis Point. It's also known as Thorn Point, and this is where the penny ferry would have left and gone over to 𝕾𝖈𝖍𝖘. I presume it is named after the shape of the actual point. It does look like a thorn because a lot of literal translations do associate the Gaelic word with deer. These are some of the remains of the old fishermen and ferrymen's buildings, and also some of the quarry workers. This is the tenement that a lot of the quarry workers would have lived in. Breedon currently own the granite quarry here that we're about to walk through, but it was owned by J.A. Gardner a way back 120 years ago. Bonawe literally translates to mouth of the River Aa. The 𝕮𝖳 village beside this quarry has a population of 70. It wasn't always that way though. 120 years ago, this would have been a thriving populace of 1,000. Stonemasons, drillers and extractors would have been employed to work at the quarry at the turn of the 20th century. They brought with them their families and they needed resources. At one stage, Bonawe had a butcher's, a baker's, a laundry, to name a few. All that has since gone, unfortunately. Even the school that was open for 128 years and actually had 40 guys that had been evacuated during the Second World War at one stage, it shut as well in 2014. Today, obviously, quarrying is less labour intensive and people are prepared to commute further for their place of work, and that has contributed to Bonawe becoming much smaller. Even historically, the area had a lot of trade, maybe not so legally. Colin Campbell had a bit of business in inverted commas where he peddled brandy and wine and was actually pushing for tobacco factories in the likes of Oban. Worth mentioning as well, 𝕾𝖑𝖆𝖓𝖃 that was completed just at the turn of the 20th century. It was also made from granite taken from this quarry. We can take pictures of that dangerous sign. Absolutely no idea why there's a danger sign in the middle of nowhere. Can't see any impending danger. Might get your feet wet. Strewn all along the edge of Loch Etive are various clumps of stones which have clearly been some kind of settlement at some stage. It is quite a stunning day to be out, though it's ice-bitingly cold. Let's send the intrepid one up. There are so many bits and pieces left of dwellings and shylings and sheepfolds. You can tell it was obviously a really, really thriving place at one stage. This is a more modern pier on the loch shore. I was going to go down off the road, but it's like fire pit city down there. It's quite a popular place for bushcrafters and wild campers because it's like a 2-minute walk from the quarry. There are 20 colonies of common seals that have been recorded on Loch Etive and numerous colonies of grey. Greys are more common than common, despite common making you think they are common, but actually the grey seals are more common. Loch Etive, because of its beauty, has been the scene of quite a lot of filming over the years. 𝕮𝖆𝖉𝖉, Braveheart, and up at the very far end of the loch, Skyfall and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Loch Etive is said to translate from the Gaelic of Little Fierce One to describe the Gaelic goddess who ran the waters. Some translators have said it's Little Ugly One, but look behind me, that's rubbish. I'm going with the former. So now we are approaching Cadderlie. It's an old abandoned settlement, and we'll tell you a wee bit about it. It has been a beautiful walk, a stunning scenery. It's 3.5 miles in, all on forestry track, which is very good because we've spent so much time taking footage and taking pictures that we're going to be walking back in the dark. But we'll tell you about Cadderlie first. Cadderlie is said to derive from the Gaelic for Deirdre's garden. And yes, we're back to Deirdre of the Sorrows. I'll put a wee link up to the trip we took actually out on Loch Etive in the canoe, and found other sort of bits and pieces associated with the Deirdre and Nis story. Records do show an orchard here right until the early 16th century. Apparently an extremely high tide finished it off. It's just been wind, rain and snow for the last while. That's what's going to finish me off today. That tidal island in the distance is allegedly where Deirdre had her bower. It's called Eilean Duirinnis, which is the Isle of the Sons of 𝕬𝖈. In the 13th century, this land was granted to Colin, Earl of 𝕵𝖕 from the MacDougals. There are records of 3 separate holdings here, which were taken over by the Campbells of Ardhatton. Latterly, the McCalls, the McGillivrays and McIntyres, that was a nice boggy bit, moved into this area. The McIntyres were from Glencoe, but not originally. I'll tell you a story about them in a minute. It's said that Robin Williams, 6 times great-grandfather, yes, him of Mrs. Doubtfire fame, apparently they emigrated from here, Cadderlie. The fantastic singer, Scottish singer Dougie MacLean, also has links here. It said his grandfather was from the area. The records would indicate that he lived up at Craig Farm. I'll put a wee picture of it up now. But Dougie wrote a song called Eternity, and it was inspired by his visit to this really remote and windswept abandoned settlement. Yeah, so we'll get back to the McIntyre story. The McIntyres that lived here way back were originally from Sleat and Skye. I'm not looking at the camera because I'm walking through a bog fest. Yeah, so they were from Skye, and they decided that they would come south to get better pasture land, and they came down into Loch Etive. They brought a white cow with them. I know, it wasn't a magic cow, honestly. They did decide that wherever the cow lay down is where they would stay. And the cow lay down across the loch here at 𝕮𝖆𝖈. So they settled in 𝕮𝖆𝖈. Their rent for 𝕮𝖆𝖈 was one white cow per year and a snowball from the top of Cruachan on Midsummer's Day. Now, we have had that story before. I'll put a link to 𝕮𝖆𝖈 where there was other people paying a snowball rent as well. Like I said, it's handy that it's a forestry road track on the way home, because there's the moon out with the snow over 𝕮𝖉𝖉, and it's just as well that Martin brought the good torch. Another interesting story about the McIntyres is they were fishermen, and one of the McIntyres was out on the loch one of the days, and his boat sprung a leak. So he trundled about the boat to find something to plug the leak, and found nothing except for his old axe, which he swiftly took his own thumb off with to plug the hole, and he got back to the shore safely. The buildings here would have started off as black houses and crook-built buildings. Really, half the building would have been a house and the other half would have been a byre for their animals. The remains of these buildings are thought to be sort of late 18th, early 19th century. The valuation rolls at the turn of the 20th century showed empty cross at that stage. The First World War really finished Cadderlie off, with so many brave men going to fight and so few returning. By 1930, there was one building left with a roof. And if we swing round, there it is, Cadderlie Bothy. Cadderlie Bothy is now owned by the Mountain Bothy Association. It wasn't always the way. The last known permanent resident at the Bothy was a guy 𝕰𝖕𝖊, and he was a shepherd in the area. Once he passed on, and obviously the place was left vacant, it was used sort of sporadically for artistes and sheep shears until the Bothy Association bought it over in the 90s. Even the burn at Cadderlie is of interest. Geologists have found proof of dikes protruding into what would have been then molten lava, and also mantle-derived magmas. Geologists believe that Cadderlie does form a small fault line between the 𝕮𝖉𝖉 and Cruachan range. That was a nice afternoon hike up to Cadderlie and some of the chat about the loch. Now for an interesting 3.5 mile night hike back to the car. I hope there's no monsters or tales of monsters to tell you about. What I am going to tell you before we go back is the story of the Fachan, which is a monster who used to roam not only around Loch Etive but all the surrounding area. Apparently he was a one-armed, one-eyed, one-legged, cyclopsy looking creature with a tuft on his head. I have a quote from a book I'm currently reading. I don't want you to miss any of the gory details, so I'm going to read it out off the page. 1 second. The quote is from John Francis Campbell in Popular Tales of the Highlands, and this is how it reads. He held a very thick flail club in a skinny hand, and 20 chains out of it, and 50 apples on each of them, and a venomous spell on each of the apples, and a girdle of the skins of deer and roebuck around the thing that was his body, and one single eye in the forehead of his black-faced countenance, and one bare, hard, very hairy hand coming out of his chest, and one veiny, thick-soled leg supporting him, and a close, firm, dark blue mark of twisted, hard, thick feathers protecting his body. And surely he was more like into a devil than a man. Moral of that story: if you find an apple when you're out camping round Loch Etive, swerve it. If you enjoy stunning Scottish scenery and tales of myth, legend and historical facts, please subscribe. Feel free to join me on Instagram and Facebook of the same name, Exploring Scotland's History, and share, and we can grow this little page. Thank you for watching.